Hello everybody, how's everybody doing today?
Good. Great, how you doing? Oh, good.
I'm good.
I'm here to try and persuade you to read a book. It's one of my favorite books of all time. It's called Lord of the Flies. It was written by William Golding. The plot of the book's pretty simple. It's about a group of British schoolboys who crash land on an island and there are no adults to supervise them. Although the plot is kind of simple, the main theme of the story is pretty complicated. In a public questionnaire, Golding describes the book, and the theme is an attempt to trace the defects of society back to the defects of human nature. The moral is that the shape of society must depend on the ethical nature of the individual and not on any political system, however apparently logical or respectable. Now, William Golding himself, he was born in Cornwall in 1911, and he was brought up to be a scientist, but after 2 years at Oxford, he ended up switching his major to English literature. And he became devoted to Anglo-Saxon. When World War II broke out, he joined the Royal Navy, and he stayed there for the next 5 years of his life. When he finished his naval career, he was a lieutenant in command of a rocket ship. He had seen action against battleships, submarines, and airplanes, and even participated in the Waltron and D-Day operations. When the war was over, he began teaching and writing. His novels include this, Lord of the Flies, The Inheritors, which is loosely described as a novel of prehistory, but like this and all his other books, much more than that. And he says that his hobbies are thinking, which I found kind of clever, classical Greek, sailing, archaeology, and his literary influences are Euripides and the anonymous Anglo-Saxon author of The Battle of Muldoon. Now, the main feature of this book is symbolism. And the central symbolism of the book comes from the title, which is Lord of the Flies, which means Beelzebub in Greek, which is the devil. But the devil, he's not a devil in this book. There's no religious tradition to it. It's really the anarchic and amoral. What is it? It's the modern equivalent of the anarchic and amoral, the force that the Freudians call the id, which is basically its only function really is to ensure the survival of which only function seems to ensure the survival of the host in which it is embedded. And the symbology is seen all throughout the book, whether in characters or events or things that happen. From the characters, pretty much the main character is Jack, or no, not Ralph, and he's basically a natural-born leader. And then you have Jack, on the other hand, who's power-hungry and he wants to take power from Jack, and he's basically becomes the leader of anarchy on the island. And then you have Piggy, who represents intelligence, and then you have Simon, who represents all that is pure and good in nature, and then Sam and Eric, they're twins, and I don't know. And then Roger, he's a sadist, and he's the torturer and executioner on the island. And then you have things like the conch, which they blow to have these meetings, and it basically represents order on the island, and it's a shell, and it's very fragile, and it can break. And if the shell breaks, all order breaks and whatnot. And then you have the fire, which is they build on top of the mountain, and it's the fire that if they keep the fire going, then they still have a sense of wanting to be rescued. And if the fire goes out, then they lose hope and don't care to be rescued and all that. And then they have what they call the beastie, which is basically Golding describes as like fear of the unknown, like aliens. We don't know it's out there, so we're scared of it, And
Boogeyman.
Well, I'm gonna read an excerpt, just this part in the book where it's like the turning point in the struggle with Ralph and Jack and leadership on the island. It's when they kill a sow. They were just behind her when she staggered into an open space where bright flowers grew and butterflies danced around each other, and the air was hot and still. Here, struck down by the heat, the sow fell, and the hunters hurled themselves at her. This dreadful eruption from an unknown world made her frantic. She squealed and bucked, and the air was full of sweat and noise and blood and terror. Roger ran round the heap, prodding with his spear whenever pig flesh appeared. Jack was on top of the stove, stabbing downward with his knife. Roger, the natural sadist, he found a lodgment for his point and began to push till he was leaning with his whole weight. The spear moved forward inch by inch, and the terrified squealing became a high-pitched scream. Then Jack found the throat, and the hot blood spouted over his hands. The stove collapsed under them, and they were heavy and filled upon her. The butterfly still danced, preoccupied, in the center of the clearing. So yeah, that's the turning point in the struggle between Ralph and Jack and leadership on the island. And now I'm just going to read some things that critics have said about the book. They've used phrases like beautifully written, tragic and provocative, vivid and enthralling, like a fragment of nightmare, a dizzy climax of terror. So basically, if you like to read, this is a must-read. It's a really good book. I'd suggest checking it out. It's one of my favorite, like I said. And my sources are, there's an E.L. Epstein passage in the back of the book. I use Wikipedia, and then this other website called grenier.com/WTF, something like that. And that's it.
Thank you. Good night.